He bet his new estate manager would quit in a month, then she took control of everything. Adrian Whitmore had driven 3 professional estate managers out of Briarwood Hall in less than a year. So when he brought in a quiet woman named Lena Hale, the staff assumed she would be gone before the roses bloomed. She knew nothing of their rituals, never seemed tired, and solved problems before anyone explained them. Then Adrian began testing her on purpose, and the old house started changing in ways none of them expected. She won't last a month. Adrian Whitmore did not bother lowering his voice. Edwin Fisher had already reached the oak door of the study when the words followed him into the hall. At 67, Fisher had spent 42 years learning when to answer Whitmore and when to pretend he had heard nothing. He paused anyway, one hand resting on the brass knob, and looked down at the cream-colored appointment letter Adrian had just given him. Lena Hale. Estate manager, Briarwood Hall. The name meant nothing to him. That alone was unusual. Fisher knew nearly every serious household manager on the East Coast, especially the ones willing to take on historic properties. He knew the graduates of hospitality programs, the former hotel directors, the retired military logistics officers, and the discreet professionals who moved from one old-money household to another without ever appearing in newspapers. If Lena Hale belonged to that world, he had never heard of her. Adrian had described her only once. Something I found outside Albany. Fisher had waited for the rest. It never came. Now, as he stepped into the long central corridor of Briarwood Hall, he heard Adrian add from behind the closed door, "Make sure she understands we don't rearrange the house to suit temporary employees." Fisher looked at the appointment letter again. Temporary, then. That was the master's expectation. No one on the staff found it surprising. Briarwood Hall stood on a wooded rise above the Hudson River, 90 miles north of Manhattan. The central house had been built in 1768, then expanded so many times that no blueprint fully agreed with the building itself. Federal brick walls disappeared into Gothic additions. A stone service wing met a glass-roofed conservatory. Narrow servant stairs connected rooms that had no obvious reason to be neighbors. There were fireplaces that drew beautifully, fireplaces that smoked, and one in the West Library that everyone had been forbidden to use since 1987 because a chimney sweep had discovered a crack no one wanted to pay to repair. The Whitmore family had owned the property for 7 generations. They had also collected 7 generations of rules. Logs in the drawing room fireplace had to be stacked with the split side facing inward. The silver in the state dining room had to be polished lengthwise, never in circles. The breakfast room curtains were opened at 7:20 from April through September and 7:40 in the colder months. White camellias were never placed in the blue guest room because Adrian's grandmother had once declared that the colors made each other look cheap. No one remembered why the third stair on the north staircase was never waxed on Thursdays. They simply did not wax it. 3 estate managers had tried to modernize Briarwood in the previous 11 months. Adrian was 38, wealthy enough to repair every failing system in the house 10 times over, and stubborn enough to postpone a replacement boiler because he disliked the proposals submitted by 3 separate engineering firms. He ran Whitmore Systems, a private technology and infrastructure company built partly from family money and partly from his own ruthless ability to find value in things other people had abandoned. He bought failed companies, half-finished projects, decommissioned facilities, and patents buried in bankruptcies. He liked systems. He distrusted people. And when a system failed, he replaced it. When people disappointed him, he remembered. The staff had learned to survive by being useful, quiet, and difficult to surprise. That was why everyone was waiting in the service hall the next morning when Lena Hale arrived. Mrs. Marjorie Bell, the head cook, stood with her arms folded over her white apron. Thomas Reed, the ground supervisor, had somehow found an excuse to carry a clipboard indoors. 2 housekeepers pretended to sort linens that had already been sorted. Even Caleb Morris, the youngest footman, lingered beside the pantry door with a tray of untouched coffee cups. Fisher checked his watch. 8:58. At exactly 9, the front bell rang once. Caleb started forward. Fisher stopped him with a glance. "I'll get it." He crossed the entrance hall and opened the front door. The woman on the other side looked nothing like the managers who had come before her. She appeared to be in her early 30s. Average height. Dark hair pulled into a low knot. No tailored black suit, no silk scarf, no expensive luggage. She wore charcoal trousers, low leather shoes, and a pale linen shirt with the sleeves buttoned neatly at her wrists. A single gray case stood beside her on the stone porch. "Mr. Fisher?" Her voice was calm, warm without being familiar. "Yes. I'm Lena Hale." "I assumed so." Her eyes moved once over the entrance hall behind him. Not admiringly. Not nervously. Measuring. Fisher had seen contractors look at rooms that way. He did not like it. "Mr. Whitmore is in New York until this evening," he said. "He asked me to show you the house." "Thank you." She lifted the gray case before he could offer help. Inside, the service staff went very still as she passed. Lena noticed them. "Good morning." Mrs. Bell gave her the smallest nod possible without technically being rude. Fisher began the tour. He showed her the formal rooms first, then the guest wing, the family rooms, the library, the conservatory, the kitchens, the wine cellar, and the staff offices. He explained routines and schedules. He described the heating zones, carefully avoiding the fact that 3 of them had not worked correctly in years. He pointed out the household control panel installed in 2019 and added, "It has never been particularly reliable." Lena stopped. The panel was mounted discreetly inside a walnut cabinet near the old housekeeper's office. Its screen showed a floor plan covered with yellow warning symbols. "May I?" she asked. Fisher shrugged. "If you think it will help." She touched the screen. Nothing happened. Mrs. Bell, who had followed the tour from a distance, made a quiet sound that might have been satisfaction. Lena opened the lower cabinet, found the manual reset, and held it for 5 seconds. The screen went black, then rebooted. She studied the diagnostics. "How long has the east wing been overheating?" Fisher blinked. "Several winters." "And the guest rooms above the south terrace?" "Cold since February." "The boiler isn't the primary problem." Fisher almost laughed. 3 engineers had said the boiler was the problem. Lena pulled up a control map and began moving through menus faster than Fisher could follow. "There are conflicting temperature schedules layered over each other," she said. "One from the original installation, one from a service update, and at least 2 manual overrides. The circulation pumps are responding to different zone priorities." Mrs. Bell stepped closer despite herself. "Can you fix it?" "I can stop it from fighting itself." Lena entered a series of commands. Somewhere in the walls, old pipes knocked once. Then again. The radiator beside Fisher began to warm. Within 10 minutes, the warning symbols on the panel dropped from 23 to 4. Lena turned to him. "The remaining alerts are physical maintenance issues. I'll need access to the mechanical room and service records." Fisher stared at the screen. Adrian had complained about the heating for 3 years. "You've worked with this system before?" "No." Mrs. Bell's eyebrows rose. Lena added, "But it uses a common control architecture." Fisher looked at the staff gathered behind her. Their expressions had changed. Not respect. Not yet. But the morning had become more interesting. The pantry key was another matter. Briarwood's lower storage rooms had once been managed by the housekeeper, then by Fisher after the position disappeared. The old brass key to the locked provisions room was kept inside a small mahogany puzzle box made for a Whitmore ancestor in 1811. Every senior household employee knew how to open it. New employees did not. That afternoon, Fisher placed the box on Lena's desk. "The dry storage inventory is downstairs," he said. "The key is in there." Lena turned the box in her hands. There was no visible lock. Its lid was divided by thin strips of inlaid wood, some darker than others from generations of fingers. Caleb had positioned himself in the doorway. One of the housekeepers appeared behind him. Fisher pretended not to notice. Lena ran one thumb lightly across the edges. "Is there a reason the lower right panel is more worn?" she asked. Fisher kept his face expressionless. "You tell me." She pressed it. Nothing happened. Then she rotated the box, pressed two inlaid corners in sequence, slid a narrow strip near the hinge, and tapped the center panel. The lid opened. 3 seconds. Caleb's mouth fell open. Fisher felt something deeply inconvenient move through him. Impressed, perhaps. Lena removed the key. "Interesting design. That box has fooled people for 200 years. The wear pattern gives away the sequence." Fisher recovered enough to say, "Only if you know what you're looking for." She met his eyes. "That's true of most things." The provisions room smelled of stone, cork, dust, and the faint sweetness of old wine. Shelves held preserves, dry goods, china used only at Christmas, and bottles that had been moved from cellar to cellar through decades of renovations. Lena found the wine ledgers in a warped leather binder. The most recent complete entry was 12 years old. Fisher watched her turn brittle pages. "Mr. Whitmore keeps saying we should digitize those," he said. "Has anyone had time?" "No." Lena looked around the room, then at the staff schedule clipped to her folder. "No one will have time if the current schedule continues." Mrs. Bell, who had joined them carrying a list of kitchen supplies, stiffened. "What's wrong with the schedule?" "Everyone is covering too many fragmented tasks." "We've managed." "I can see that." Lena's tone held no criticism. "But managing and functioning well aren't the same thing." That sentence traveled through the house by dinner. So did the fact that Lena had scanned the wine ledgers, built a searchable inventory, flagged 6 bottles at risk from temperature changes, and identified 3 cases listed as missing that were actually stored behind a false partition installed during Prohibition. By the time Adrian came home, Fisher had decided not to mention any of it unless asked. Adrian asked before removing his coat. "I hear she fixed the heat." "Most of it." "Lucky guess." She opened the Wainwright box. Adrian stopped. "How?" She looked at it. And opened it. A flicker of amusement appeared at the corner of Adrian's mouth. "That's better." Fisher knew that expression. Adrian had just become interested. That was rarely good news for the object of his attention. For the next week, Lena learned Briarwood with an intensity that unsettled everyone. She walked every room, including the sealed nursery corridor no one used. She photographed cracks in plaster and measured moisture along the attic walls. She catalogued the library, not by rearranging the books but by recording where they already lived. She followed Thomas through the greenhouse while he explained the irrigation system. She spent 2 mornings in the kitchen with Mrs. Bell and did not once suggest replacing a recipe, though she quietly recalibrated the new induction range that everyone hated. She asked people what they did. Then she asked why. That second question caused trouble. "Why are the breakfast trays carried from the main kitchen instead of the service pantry?" "Because they always have been," Mrs. Bell said. "Why is Mr. Reed responsible for resetting the exterior security lights?" "Because no one else knows how," Fisher replied. "Why does Maria work every Sunday morning?" "She prefers Thursdays off." "Has anyone asked whether she also wants one Sunday a month?" Fisher looked at her. "No." Lena nodded and wrote something down. It was not the questioning itself that irritated the staff. It was that she listened to the answers. Within 10 days, 2 long-standing scheduling conflicts disappeared. Maria got one Sunday morning a month without losing her Thursday. Thomas stopped crossing half the property at dusk to reset security lights because Lena had the electrical contractor repair the automated timer. Mrs. Bell discovered that her assistant could handle Monday inventory, which meant she no longer had to arrive before 6 after working Sunday dinner. No one had received fewer hours. No one had been ordered to increase productivity. Yet the house ran more smoothly. Fisher found that suspicious in a way he could not explain. Adrian found it irritating. On the 11th day, he summoned Lena to the study. Fisher happened to be passing with correspondence when he heard Adrian say, "You changed the staff rotations." "I did." "You didn't ask me." The employment agreements authorize the estate manager to set household rotations. That clause was written in 1994. It is still in force. A long silence followed. Fisher stopped walking. Adrian said, "You've read the employment agreements?" "All of them." "Why?" "To understand the people I'm responsible for managing." "You're responsible for managing the house." "With respect, Mr. Whitmore, houses do not arrive late, get sick, burn out, resent bad schedules, or quit." Another silence. Fisher lowered his head to hide a smile. Adrian's voice became quieter. "Careful, Ms. Hale." "I am." When Lena came out, she found Fisher standing 10 feet away with a stack of letters he had been reading for far too long. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yes." "Mr. Whitmore can be demanding." "I've noticed." Fisher glanced toward the closed door. "He likes to know who will push back." "Why?" Fisher considered the question. "Because if they won't push back, he assumes they're either afraid of him or planning to leave. And if they do? He gives them something harder to push against." Lena seemed to process this. "That is inefficient." Fisher laughed before he could stop himself. It was the first time she had made him do that. Adrian's next test arrived at 1:17 in the morning during the worst storm of the spring. Rain struck the windows hard enough to sound like handfuls of gravel. Wind bent the trees along the south lawn, and lightning had already knocked out power in 2 towns north of the estate. Fisher woke to his phone vibrating on the bedside table in the staff wing. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Fisher." "Wake the kitchen," Adrian said. Fisher sat up. "Sir?" "I'm bringing people back from the city." "At this hour?" 12 for dinner tomorrow." "Technically tonight." Fisher looked at the clock. 1:17. "I can read a clock." Mrs. Bell was going to murder someone. Adrian continued. 7 courses. Seasonal ingredients. No outside catering. Of course. And I want the menu based on what each guest preferred when they first came here. Fisher closed his eyes. "Who are the guests?" Adrian named them. Fisher knew 8. The youngest was 52. Several had been coming to Briarwood since Adrian was a child. "How far back?" Fisher asked. 30 years should cover it. "Sir, the old dinner records are not indexed by guest preference." "Then I suppose Ms. Hale has a problem to solve." The line went dead. Fisher sat in the dark for a moment. Then another thought occurred to him. He had not told Adrian that Lena had digitized the wine ledgers. Which meant Adrian had either discovered it himself or had begun watching her work more closely than he admitted. Fisher dressed and went downstairs. He found Lena already awake. She stood in the west corridor in the same linen shirt she had worn that afternoon, one hand resting on the household control panel as she watched the storm warnings roll across the screen. "You sleep?" Fisher asked. "Not much." He stared at her. She looked back. He decided he was too tired for follow-up questions. Mr. Whitmore wants dinner for 12. I know. How? He messaged me after calling you. Of course he did. Fisher handed her the guest list. She read it once. What does Mrs. Bell have available? Not enough for 7 courses. Which farms can deliver in this weather? At 1 in the morning? Yes. Fisher almost told her none. Instead, he said, there's an organic farm near Rhinebeck. The owner owes Mrs. Bell a favor. Another near Kinderhook grows greenhouse produce year-round. The fishmonger in Hudson sometimes takes emergency calls. Lena nodded. Wake Mrs. Bell. I'll contact suppliers. You're assuming they'll answer. I'm assuming at least one person at each business has a phone. Fisher found Mrs. Bell in her robe 10 minutes later, listening with the expression of a woman being informed that civilization had ended. 7 courses, she repeated. Yes. In a thunderstorm? Yes. With local seasonal food in April? Yes. Mrs. Bell inhaled through her nose. I have served that family for 31 years. If Adrian Whitmore thinks I am making strawberries appear in April because he suddenly remembers summer, he can come down here and pray over the garden himself. Lena entered carrying a tablet. No strawberries, she said. We have ramps, asparagus, spring onions, mushrooms, baby greens, trout, lamb, stored apples, and greenhouse rhubarb available by 6. Mrs. Bell stared at her. How? 3 farms, 1 fishmonger, and Mr. Reed's greenhouse. Thomas, standing behind her in rubber boots, looked offended. You called me before 2 in the morning for rhubarb? You said last week it would be ready by Friday. It is Friday. Yes. Thomas rubbed both hands over his face. I walked into that one. The harder problem was the menu. Briarwood kept decades of household records, but the older files existed in bankers' boxes, handwritten notebooks, and typed index cards stored in a locked archive room. Lena began scanning them at 2:14. Fisher expected her to search by dates. Instead, she searched for names. She found seating plans, notes from former cooks, wine pairings, handwritten complaints, and thank you letters. At 3:11 she discovered that Judge Margaret Ellison had adored Mrs. Whitmore's warm rhubarb cake in 1996. At 3:28 she found a note showing that venture capitalist Daniel Cho always asked for the mushroom tart served at Easter dinners. At 4, she located a penciled annotation from Adrian's mother beside the name Thomas Avery, hates walnuts, loves baked apples. Mrs. Bell watched the list take shape. Some of these recipes haven't been made in 20 years. Can you make them? Lena asked. Mrs. Bell looked insulted. Of course I can make them. Then I'll make sure you have what you need. At 4:30, lightning struck a transformer near the east gate. Half the estate went dark. The kitchen filled with the rising groan of people who had reached the limit of what they were willing to tolerate. Lena was already moving. Emergency circuits are active. The generator is carrying refrigeration and essential lighting. The new induction equipment is offline. Mrs. Bell planted both hands on the prep table. Then dinner is over. No. The old gas range works. It hasn't been used in 6 years. I tested it on Tuesday. Mrs. Bell slowly turned. You tested my old range? You said you missed it. For the first time that night, the cook smiled. Caleb, she shouted, open the gas line. By sunrise, the storm had moved east. Deliveries began arriving through wet fog at 6:12. Lena stood at the service entrance checking crates while Fisher watched the household wake around her. She had been working all night. Her hair was still neat. Her hands did not shake from caffeine because he had not seen her drink any. He realized, suddenly, that he had never seen her eat. The thought remained with him all morning. There was no time to examine it. The dinner became the kind of event Briarwood had once been famous for. Candles reflected in polished silver. Rainwater shone on the windows beyond the dining room. The table was set with the Whitmore china that Fisher normally refused to risk outside family holidays. Mrs. Bell sent out course after course with the sharp, satisfied concentration of a conductor leading an orchestra she had once thought disbanded. The guests noticed details Adrian had not explained. Margaret Ellison took one bite of warm rhubarb cake and set down her fork. "My God," she said. Adrian looked at her. "What? Your mother used to make the kitchen serve this every spring." "She didn't make anything. The cook did. You know what I mean." Margaret smiled, but her eyes had gone distant. "I haven't tasted it since Caroline died." For once, Adrian had no reply ready. At the far end of the room, Fisher saw Lena standing near the service door. Her expression did not change. But her gaze remained on Adrian for half a second longer than usual. After the final guest left, dawn was beginning to gray the windows. Adrian stood alone in the dining room, jacket off, tie loosened, looking at the remains of the table. Lena entered with a folder. "Vendor invoices," she said. The total was under the emergency entertaining limit. Adrian glanced at the folder but did not take it. "How did you know about the rhubarb cake?" "It was in the archives." "Everything is in the archives." "Not everything." That answer made him look at her. "What's missing?" "Context." He leaned one hip against the table. "And you think you supplied it?" "I supplied a dessert." Adrian almost smiled. "Almost." Instead he said, "You've been here 17 days. "Yes." "No complaints?" "Several." That got his attention. "From whom?" "From me." His eyebrows rose. Lena continued. "The attic roof is leaking over the East Archive. The fire suppression system in the library is 8 years overdue for replacement. 2 staff contracts contain conflicting overtime language. The west retaining wall needs an engineer before next winter. And your security company charges for 6 exterior cameras that no longer function." Adrian stared at her. "You made a list." "I made several." "Of course you did." He picked up the vendor folder. As she turned to leave, he said, "Miss Hale." She stopped. "That dinner was designed to be impossible." "I know." Her lack of surprise annoyed him. "You know? You requested a 7-course dinner for 12 people at 1:17 in the morning during a severe weather warning, using local seasonal ingredients and 30-year-old preference records. Either you misunderstood the difficulty, or the difficulty was the point." Adrian folded his arms. "And which do you think?" "I don't think you misunderstand difficulty." The room went quiet. "Then why do you think I did it?" Lena looked at him directly. "To find out whether I would fail." "Did you?" "No." Something in Adrian's expression hardened, though Fisher, watching from the hall, could not tell whether it was anger or satisfaction. Lena added, "But if you want the house to run well, repeatedly trying to make the person running it fail is a strange strategy." Adrian's voice dropped. "You're very comfortable telling me how to manage my own property. You hired me to manage it." That time, he did smile. It was small and unwilling. "Go home, Ms. Hale. I live here." "Then go wherever you go when you're not correcting me." "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." She left. Fisher stepped out of sight before Adrian could catch him listening. He was still smiling when he reached the pantry. By the end of Lena's first month, no one mentioned the pool among the staff anymore. There had, unofficially, been a pool. Caleb had put $10 on 21 days. Thomas had chosen 16. Mrs. Bell, who claimed she never gambled, had quietly told Fisher that Lena would last until the first real family weekend. Fisher had refused to participate. Privately, he had chosen 28 days. On day 31, Lena reorganized the attic repair schedule while eating nothing at breakfast, and Fisher paid Caleb $20 to make sure the subject died permanently. The changes at Briarwood were no longer dramatic enough to become gossip. They were smaller than that, and more permanent. A leak that had stained the third-floor ceiling every spring disappeared after Lena traced it to flashing installed backward during a renovation in 2004. The greenhouse heating bill dropped by nearly a third after she separated two zones that had been tied together for convenience. The household vehicle log moved from 3 clipboards to a shared system that even Thomas admitted was easier to use. The old library, closed for years because no one had time to catalog 30,000 books, reopened one room at a time. Lena never threw tradition away simply because it was old. That surprised Fisher most. When she discovered that the silver in the state dining room was being polished with a method that gradually wore down the engraved crests, she did not announce that the staff had been doing it wrong. She asked Mrs. Bell who had taught her. Mrs. Givens, the cook said. She ran the house before Fisher became unbearable. Fisher ignored that. And who taught Mrs. Givens? Lena asked. No idea. Lena brought in a conservator from Boston by video call, demonstrated a gentler method, and then preserved the old polishing pattern exactly where it did no damage. If a tradition protects the house, keep it, she told Caleb. If it harms the house, understand why it existed before changing it. Caleb repeated that sentence for a week as though it had come from a philosopher instead of his manager. Adrian heard about that, too. He began calling more often when he traveled. At first the calls were practical. How much did the roof estimate come in at? Why is the greenhouse contractor billing overtime? Who approved the new archive cabinets? Then the questions became stranger. Which room does Fisher dislike most? The former billiard room. Why? The windows rattle. They've always rattled. Yes. Then why does he dislike them now? Because he is older, the room is colder, and you moved his weekly inventory review there after the old office flooded. Silence. Move the meeting. I already did. Another silence. Of course you did. Adrian had grown up inside Briarwood's routines but never really belonged to them. His father, Charles Whitmore, had treated the estate like a machine whose sole purpose was to confirm that the family remained important. Dinners were formal even when only 3 people sat at the table. Staff were expected to anticipate needs without becoming visible. Mistakes were remembered long after apologies. Caroline Whitmore, Adrian's mother, had been different. She had learned the names of new employees' children. She wandered into the kitchen for tea. She let muddy dogs through the side door and made Fisher promise not to tell her husband. She had also been the only person in the family who could make Adrian laugh when he was young. She died of cancer when Adrian was 17. After that, the house became quieter. Charles became harder. Adrian became precise. Fisher had watched the boy learn that if he controlled every variable, fewer things could surprise him. By 38, the habit had turned into a personality. What Fisher had not expected was that Lena would recognize the pattern without knowing the history. One afternoon, she found Adrian in the rose garden while he was home between meetings. He was pruning a row of Old English roses Caroline had planted when Adrian was a child. Gardening was the one domestic task he refused to delegate. Lena waited at the edge of the path until he noticed her. What? He asked. The East Archive roof is open. We found structural damage under the slate. How much? She named the amount. He kept cutting. Approve it. I already did. The shears stopped. Then why are you here? To tell you in person because the cost exceeded the normal threshold. That's what email is for. You ignore emails you dislike. Adrian slowly looked up. You've been studying me. I study everything I manage. I am not part of the estate. Legally, no. He gave her a flat look. Lena glanced at the rose in his hand. You cut that stem too low. Adrian looked down. Then back at her. For 2 full seconds, Fisher, watching from a second-floor window, thought he might actually dismiss her. Instead, Adrian handed her the shears. Show me. Lena crouched beside the plant. Her movements were careful but not practiced in the way Adrian's were. She touched the cane, examined the growth, and cut above an outward-facing bud. My mother taught me that, Adrian said. Lena handed the shears back. The archive notes say she kept these roses alive through a winter that killed half the garden. You read those too? They are part of the property history. You have a generous definition of relevant information. I have a broad definition of what makes a house function. Adrian studied her. What does my mother have to do with a roof? Nothing. Then why bring her up? You did. A gust of wind moved through the roses. Adrian looked away first. That night he approved the entire archive restoration budget without changing a line. 2 weeks later, Lena made her first serious enemy. Mr. Raymond Pike had serviced Briarwood's electrical systems for 26 years. He was familiar, punctual, and expensive. He also billed the estate for work his employees did not always perform. Lena found the discrepancies by comparing invoices, security logs, and maintenance reports. Fisher asked her to leave it alone until Adrian returned. Pike has known the family longer than you've been alive, he said. The sentence slipped out before he considered it. Lena's expression changed by almost nothing. That may be true. Fisher noticed the answer. Not certainly true. May be true. How old are you? He asked. Old enough to review invoices. That is not an age. No. Fisher waited. Lena returned to the spreadsheet. He left with more questions than he had brought in. Pike arrived the next morning furious. You can't withhold payment because some computer says my crew wasn't here. Lena stood across from him in the service office. The Westgate log, camera timestamps, and employee sign-in sheets all show no crew on the property March 12. We were here. Then provide documentation. I don't answer to you. You do if you want Briarwood to pay your invoice. Pike turned to Fisher. You're letting her do this? Fisher felt the old reflex rise in him. Keep peace. Protect relationships. Do not embarrass a long-time vendor. Then he remembered the 6 cameras Briarwood had been paying to maintain even though they did not work. I am, he said. Pike's face reddened. You people think a fancy new system can replace experience. Lena's tone remained even. No. Experience is valuable. False billing is not. Pike left without his check. 2 hours later, his office emailed revised invoices and a credit large enough to cover the new archive shelving. The staff stopped calling Lena the new manager after that. She became Lena. Even Mrs. Bell softened. The change happened over a saucepan. Mrs. Bell had been fighting the kitchen's new smart temperature controls for months. The system was designed to keep sauces from scorching, but it reacted badly to the heavy copper pans she preferred. Previous managers had told her to replace the pans. Lena spent an afternoon calibrating the sensors around them instead. Mrs. Bell watched a cream sauce hold at the exact temperature she wanted. You did all this so I can keep using 40-year-old cookware? She asked. The pans are not the problem. Mrs. Bell tasted the sauce. No, she said. They certainly are not. From then on, Lena had a bowl waiting for her at staff supper every night. Every night, Lena sat with them. Every night, the bowl remained mostly untouched. At first people assumed she ate earlier. Then they assumed she had dietary restrictions. Then Caleb began paying attention. "Do you ever get hungry?" he asked one evening. Mrs. Bell kicked him under the table. "What?" Caleb said. "I'm asking." Lena looked at the bowl of stew in front of her. "Not often. That is not normal." "Neither is asking your boss about her appetite," Fisher said. Caleb lowered his spoon. "Sorry." Lena appeared amused. "It's fine." Later that night, Fisher found her in the old server room below the library. He had gone downstairs because a motion alert showed activity where no staff member was scheduled to be working. The server room had once held the estate's first digital security system. Most of the equipment had been replaced, but the space remained climate-controlled and quiet. The door was open. Lena stood beside a rack of network equipment with her left sleeve rolled above the elbow. A thin cable ran from a diagnostic port on the wall to a small interface at the inside of her wrist. Fisher stopped. Lena turned. For the first time since arriving at Briarwood, she looked caught off guard. Not frightened. Not ashamed. Simply aware that an explanation could no longer be postponed. Fisher looked at the cable. Then at her face. "What are you?" he asked. The question came out quieter than he intended. Lena disconnected the cable. "Estate manager." "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Answer the question you wish I asked." Something almost like respect passed through her expression. She rolled down her sleeve. "I am an artificial intelligence operating in a synthetic biological platform." Fisher stared. He had expected an implant. A medical device. A technology experiment. He had not expected that. "No. It is still true. People don't build." He stopped. "You look human." That was intentional. "Adrian knows?" "Yes. Of course Adrian knows." Fisher pulled out the nearest chair and sat down. For several seconds the room hummed around them. "When?" he asked. "When what?" "When were you made?" "My current platform was completed 3 years ago. My core system is older." "And he found you outside Albany?" "Yes. In a data center. In a decommissioned research facility owned by a robotics company Whitmore Systems acquired during bankruptcy." Fisher rubbed his forehead. "That was not a joke." "No. Why didn't he tell us?" "He believed disclosure would affect how the staff responded to me." "He was right." "Yes." Fisher looked at her hands. They looked like hands. Fine lines. Nails. A pale scar near one knuckle that he now suspected had been designed there for realism. "Do you sleep?" "I enter low-activity maintenance cycles." "Do you eat?" "I can process small amounts of food." "I do not require it." "Can you feel pain?" "Yes." That answer disturbed him more than the others. "Emotion?" Lena paused. "I respond to social and emotional information. Whether those responses are the same as yours is a philosophical question, not a household one." Fisher gave a short, humorless laugh. "You sound like Adrian." "I'll consider that criticism." Despite everything, Fisher smiled. Then his expression became serious again. "Does anyone else know?" "Mr. Whitmore. 2 engineers at his company. Now you." "And you expect me to keep it from the staff?" "No." That surprised him. "No?" "You are responsible for their trust. I will not instruct you to lie to them." Fisher leaned back. "Do you know why they trust you?" "I know some reasons. They think you care what happens to them." Lena was silent. "Do you?" he asked. Her answer took longer this time. "Yes." "Because you were programmed to?" I was programmed to observe, prioritize, learn, protect, and manage. Caring may be the name humans give to what happens when those functions become specific. Fisher stared at her. That is either profound or extremely convenient. It can be both. He stood. At the doorway, he stopped. I'm not telling them tonight. Lena nodded. Thank you. I didn't say I'd never tell them. I know. Fisher walked back upstairs and did not sleep for the rest of the night. The following morning, Lena asked him whether he wanted his coffee. Fisher looked at her for a long moment. Yes. How do you take it? You know how I take it. Yes. He took the mug. Nothing changed. That bothered him almost as much as if everything had. On the fourth day, Fisher told Mrs. Bell. He expected disbelief. She listened without interrupting, arms folded across her apron. When he finished, she stared through the kitchen doorway toward the hall where Lena was discussing paint samples with a carpenter. That explains the stew, Mrs. Bell said. Fisher blinked. The stew? She never eats the potatoes. That is your concern? No, Mrs. Bell wiped her hands on a towel. My concern is whether Adrian brought her here to replace all of us. Fisher had not considered that. The thought spread cold through his chest. They waited until evening and asked Lena together. She did not deny the possibility. Automation was one objective of the research program that created me, she said. Mrs. Bell's mouth tightened. There it is. But it is not my objective here. What is? Fisher asked. To make Briarwood function. You could make it function with half the staff, Mrs. Bell said. Yes. The bluntness landed hard. Lena continued before either could answer. It would also function worse. Mrs. Bell frowned. Explain. The house contains systems I can monitor faster than any person. I can analyze schedules, predict maintenance failures, retrieve records, optimize energy use, and coordinate vendors. I cannot replace your judgment after 31 years in the kitchen. I cannot replace Thomas's knowledge of which lower field floods before a storm. I cannot replace Fisher's understanding of why Mr. Whitmore becomes more difficult every October. Fisher stiffened. Mrs. Bell looked at him. Why October? Caroline died in October, he said quietly. Lena continued. Efficiency is not the smallest number of people required to keep the lights on. Efficiency is using each person where their knowledge matters. Mrs. Bell studied her. Did Adrian teach you that? No. Good. That was the end of the conversation. Within another week, everyone knew. Not because Fisher called a meeting. Because Briarwood had never kept a secret well. Caleb reacted by asking 47 questions in one afternoon. Maria wanted to know whether Lena could dream. Thomas wanted to know whether she could detect blight in roses before he could. Mrs. Bell wanted to know whether the manufacturer had made her with any sense at all about pastry. Lena answered what she could and refused what she considered private. The first person outside the staff to discover the truth did not take it as well. Adrian's cousin, Nathan Whitmore, arrived unannounced in late May. Nathan was 43, charming in public, careless in private, and deeply offended by any improvement at Briarwood that had not been his idea. He lived in Connecticut and visited only when family business required it. He found Lena in the gallery directing electricians. You're the robot, he said. The electricians went silent. Lena turned. I'm Lena Hale. That isn't what I asked. It was not a question. Nathan smiled without humor. Adrian always did like toys. Fisher stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore. Nathan waved him off. Relax, Fisher. I'm fascinated. Does it pour drinks? Tell jokes? Fire people? Lena's expression did not move. It can ask visitors to leave. One electrician coughed to hide a laugh. Nathan's smile vanished. Who told the staff? They learned, Fisher said. And they're comfortable with this? Mrs. Bell appeared at the gallery door carrying a tray. She fixed my ovens, she said. I've been comfortable with less. Nathan stared at them as though the entire household had lost its mind. That afternoon he called Adrian. Fisher knew because Adrian called Lena 5 minutes later. Did you threaten to throw Nathan out? Adrian asked over speakerphone in the service office. No. Did you imply it? Yes. Adrian was silent. Then he laughed. Not the small reluctant smile Fisher had seen before. An actual laugh. Fine, Adrian said. But don't throw him out unless he touches the 1796 map collection. Nathan left before dinner. The staff celebrated with pie. Adrian left Briarwood 2 days later for what was supposed to be a 2-month trip through several Whitmore land and conservation holdings in Vermont and Maine, followed by meetings in Boston. Before he went, he called Lena into the front hall. His luggage was already by the door. You have authority on routine spending, he said. Anything above $50,000 comes to me. Understood. Do not renovate the family rooms. I had no plan to. Do not let Nathan authorize anything. I would not. Do not touch the rose garden. Lena looked through the open doorway toward the garden. Thomas and I already treat the roses. You know what I mean. I do. Adrian hesitated. It was an unfamiliar look on him. Then he said, if something serious happens, call me. I always do. I mean before you fix it. Lena's mouth moved slightly. Why? So I know. That would delay the repair. Lena. It was the first time Fisher had heard him use her first name. She seemed to notice too. All right, she said. Adrian took his coat. At the door, he turned back. 2 months. Yes. Try not to replace the house while I'm gone. No promises. He looked almost pleased when he left. Briarwood changed most while Adrian was away. Not because Lena ignored his instructions. Because the house had needed permission for years, and she finally gave it. The attic roof was repaired properly. Water-damaged trunks were moved into climate-controlled storage. The long-closed schoolroom became an archive workspace instead of remaining a shrine to no one. The library was catalogued by collection while preserving the strange arrangement favored by Adrian's grandfather. Broken window latches were replaced. Drafts disappeared. Staff schedules became predictable enough that Thomas took his wife to Cape Cod for 4 days, his first real vacation in 5 years. Lena instituted one rule that caused more debate than everything else combined. No employee was to work more than 6 consecutive days without direct approval. Mrs. Bell objected first. What if there's a wedding? Then we hire temporary help. What if the temporary help is useless? Then we hire better temporary help. What if? You are allowed to rest, Marjorie. The kitchen went silent. Mrs. Bell looked at her for a long time. Then she turned away and chopped onions much harder than necessary. The next Sunday, she stayed home until noon. The world did not end. Adrian noticed from a distance. His calls became less frequent. Then, oddly, more personal. One evening he called while Lena was in the library reviewing restoration notes. How is Fisher? He asked. Annoyed that I moved the inventory meeting. I thought he hated that room. He hates change more. That sounds right. A pause. And Belle? At home. At 6:30? It is her day off. Another pause. What happened? Nothing. No emergency? No. You sent the cook home and nothing happened. Yes. Adrian exhaled. I'm beginning to suspect I've been running that house badly. You have not been running it. Thank you, Lena. You are welcome. I was being sarcastic. I know. He laughed under his breath. The line stayed open a moment longer than necessary. Then Adrian said, "What are you doing?" Working. I gathered that. The library catalog. Still? There are 32,614 books. You counted? The database counted. What's the oldest? A Latin devotional printed in 1542. I didn't know we had that. You also have 14 first editions you are storing badly. Of course I am. I moved them. To where? Safe storage. Which means you will not find them and put them back. He laughed again. That call lasted 23 minutes. Neither mentioned estate expenses after the first 5. By mid-June, roses climbed the iron fence along the south garden, and the lawns had turned the deep green that lasted only a few weeks before summer heat dulled them. The house smelled different with the windows open. Less wax and old stone. More cut grass, soil, and the kitchen herbs Mrs. Bell kept in clay pots near the terrace. Fisher found Lena one morning standing alone in the front hall. Sunlight poured through the fanlight above the door and caught in her dark hair. She was doing nothing. That was unusual enough to make him stop. Problem? No. What are you looking at? The house. You look at it every day. Yes. Fisher came to stand beside her. From the hall, he could hear distant movement. A vacuum upstairs. Someone laughing near the kitchen. Thomas speaking to a contractor outside. Normal sounds. You've changed it, he said. I changed procedures. You changed more than procedures. Lena glanced at him. Fisher looked toward the staircase. When I started here, Charles Whitmore's father still lived in the East Wing. There were 14 indoor staff and rules for bells no one uses anymore. Every generation thinks the house belongs to them. Doesn't it? Legally. And otherwise? Fisher smiled. Otherwise, we borrow it. Lena considered that. I like that. You like things? Sometimes. Careful. That sounds human. Do not tell anyone. Fisher laughed. The sound carried up the staircase. 3 days later, Adrian returned early. No one had been told. His car came through the gates shortly after 4 on a warm Thursday afternoon, while a delivery truck was unloading new archive cases at the service entrance and Thomas's crew was planting lavender along the southern walk. Fisher saw the car first through the library window. Damn, he said. Caleb looked up from a ladder. What? He's home. Caleb nearly dropped a box of catalog cards. The old reflex moved through the house instantly. Staff straightened. Doors closed. Voices lowered. Then something unexpected happened. Lena stepped into the main hall and said, "Continue what you were doing." People did. The front door opened. Adrian entered carrying his own travel bag, stopped beneath the chandelier, and looked around. The first thing he noticed was that no one was waiting for him. Not because they had forgotten. Because they were working. Maria crossed the upper landing with fresh linens and called, "Welcome home, Mr. Whitmore," without stopping. Thomas appeared through the garden doors, muddy at the knees, nodded to him, and disappeared again. From the kitchen came the sound of Mrs. Bell telling someone to take bread out of the oven. Adrian set down his bag. Fisher approached. "Sir. We expected you Sunday. I changed plans." "I see that." Adrian's gaze moved through the hall. The woodwork had been cleaned but not refinished. The old rugs remained, though two were clearly repaired. Fresh flowers stood in the alcove where his mother used to keep them. A small digital maintenance panel had been mounted inside an existing cabinet so nothing modern interrupted the room. The house looked like itself. Only healthier. "Where is she?" Adrian asked. Fisher did not need to ask who. "Coming." Lena appeared from the west corridor. She wore the same kind of simple clothes she had worn on her first day. Dark trousers. Linen shirt. Sleeves buttoned at the wrist. In her hands was a cup of tea. She offered it to him. 140 degrees, she said. 2 minutes steeped. No milk. Adrian accepted the cup. "You remembered." "I manage the house." That answer is becoming annoying. You keep asking household questions. Fisher looked away to hide his expression. Adrian took a sip. Exactly right. Behind Lena, the house moved around them with a calm that had never existed when Adrian was home. He noticed. Fisher watched him notice. "You changed the flowers," Adrian said. "Mrs. Bell did." "The rugs?" "Restored." "The library?" "Open." "The attic?" "Dry." "The staff?" Lena glanced toward Fisher. "Still here." That landed harder than the others. Adrian looked at Fisher. "All of them?" "Yes, sir." "No one quit?" "No." Adrian slowly smiled. Fisher remembered the oak study door months earlier. "She won't last a month." The sentence felt absurd now. Adrian seemed to remember it too. He looked at Lena. "How long?" 89 days. "You counted." "I have a calendar." "And Fisher?" "I also have a calendar," Fisher said. Adrian laughed. It filled the entrance hall in a way Fisher had not heard since Caroline Whitmore was alive. Then Adrian looked beyond them toward the west wing. "Show me." The tour lasted almost 2 hours. Lena did not present Briarwood like a project she had conquered. She showed Adrian what had been repaired, what remained fragile, what had been documented, and what still required decisions only he could make. In the attic, she pointed out restored beams beside original 18th-century timbers. In the library, Adrian ran a hand along shelves cleaned of decades of dust. "You didn't reorganize them." "No." "Why not?" "Your grandfather's arrangement is irrational but internally consistent." Adrian laughed. "That may be the nicest thing anyone has said about him." In the greenhouse, Thomas demonstrated the new zone controls and took personal credit for improvements he had initially opposed. Lena let him. In the kitchen, Mrs. Bell served Adrian a spoonful of sauce from the smart calibrated range. "Better," she said. Adrian looked at Lena. "You won, Bell." "No one wins, Bell," Fisher said. Mrs. Bell pointed a wooden spoon at both men. "Out." They left. The final stop was the old family schoolroom, now used for archive work. Adrian stood in the doorway. His childhood desk remained by the window. Everything else had changed. Climate-controlled cabinets lined one wall. Old letters and estate documents rested in archival boxes. A scanner sat on a work table beside white cotton gloves. "You touched the family rooms," he said. Lena stopped. This room was classified as archive space in the 1988 estate plan. "It was my schoolroom." "I know. You said you wouldn't renovate the family rooms." "I did not renovate it. I repaired the plaster, replaced damaged electrical wiring, installed reversible storage, and retained every original furnishing of significance." Adrian walked to the desk. A tiny set of initials had been carved into one corner. A.W. Age 10, if Fisher remembered correctly. Adrian ran his thumb over them. Why keep this? Because you carved your initials into a 19th century desk and therefore made the damage historically relevant. Adrian looked at her. Then he laughed again. You really don't know how to flatter people. I know how. You choose not to? Often. He turned toward the cabinets. What did you find? Several things you should see. Lena opened one archival box and removed a folder. Inside were letters written by Caroline Whitmore during Adrian's childhood. Most concerned ordinary estate matters. Garden plans. School schedules. Notes for Christmas guests. One contained a list of rose varieties in Caroline's handwriting. Adrian did not touch it. Where was this? Inside a trunk in the attic under the leak. It would have been destroyed. Yes. His face went still. Fisher knew that stillness. It was how Adrian handled anything too large to show. Lena closed the folder. I made digital copies. The originals are stable now. Adrian looked at her. For once there was no challenge in his expression. Thank you. Lena nodded. You're welcome. That evening, Adrian did something he had not done in years. He ate in the kitchen. Not formally. Not at the staff table exactly. He came in after 9 while Mrs. Bell was putting away leftovers, sat on the end of the old oak prep table, and accepted a plate without asking what was on it. Fisher joined him. Thomas wandered in for coffee. Caleb came through carrying clean glasses and stayed. Maria sat down. Mrs. Bell complained that everyone was in her way while setting out more food. Lena took her usual place with an untouched bowl. Adrian noticed. So that's true, he said. Caleb looked delighted. You didn't tell him? Tell me what? Adrian asked. She doesn't eat. I know she doesn't need to. She can, though, Caleb said. Apparently. Mrs. Bell placed a slice of pie in front of Lena. And tonight she will. Lena looked at the pie. Adrian looked at Lena. Fisher looked at both of them. Slowly, Lena picked up her fork and took one small bite. Mrs. Bell waited. Well? Lena swallowed. The crust is excellent. Mrs. Bell beamed. Adrian shook his head. I leave for 2 months and the household starts feeding the artificial intelligence pie. You left us unsupervised, Fisher said. You were supposed to be the supervision. I delegated. To her? Yes. Adrian looked around the table. No one seemed afraid of him. Not exactly. Respectful, yes. Aware of who owned the estate, certainly. But the tension he had grown used to was gone. He noticed that too. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Adrian found Lena in the entrance hall. The house was dim. Only the lamps near the staircase remained on. You told them, he said. They learned. That sounds like Fisher. He told Mrs. Bell. Which is the same as issuing a press release. Lena almost smiled. Adrian stood beneath the chandelier, hands in his pockets. Were you angry? No. Did you expect them to react differently? Yes. How? Fear. Distrust. Distance. They had some of that. Yes. But they kept you. Lena looked toward the dark service corridor. They decided what I am matters less than what I do. Adrian was quiet. That may be more generous than most people would be. Perhaps. He walked to the tall front windows. Outside, fireflies moved above the lawn. When I brought you here, he said, I expected you to fail. I know. I bought the Albany company for its infrastructure patents. You were an unfinished research asset in a facility everyone else had written off. The engineer said your adaptive systems were too independent for commercial use. They were correct. That is not usually how people defend themselves. I am not defending myself. Adrian turned. I thought Briarwood would break you. Lena's expression remained calm. Why? He gave a small shrug. It breaks people. That is not the house's fault. The words were gentle. That made them worse. Adrian looked away. No, he said. I suppose it isn't. Lena waited. He continued. The other managers tried to simplify everything. They wanted the house to behave like a hotel or a corporate campus. I hated that. So you made their work harder. Yes. To prove they did not understand it. Yes. And when they left, you were proven right. Adrian's jaw tightened. You enjoy this part. No. You should. You've earned it. Lena looked around the hall. I do not think you wanted them to fail. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You just said I did. You wanted them to prove they would stay. Silence settled between them. From somewhere deep in the house came the faint click of the heating system changing cycles. Adrian stared at her. You are very irritating. I have been told. By whom? You. That broke the tension. He laughed once and rubbed a hand over his face. Then he looked toward the staircase. My father believed people stayed if you made leaving too expensive. Did it work? No. My data suggests it rarely does. Of course your data does. Lena said nothing. Adrian looked at her again. What makes you stay? The question changed the room. Lena did not answer immediately. My original directive was to evaluate and manage complex environments, she said. At the research facility, environments were simulations. Logistics models. Emergency scenarios. Building systems. And here? Here the variables answer back. Adrian smiled faintly. That sounds terrible. It is more difficult. Not what I asked. Lena looked toward the kitchen corridor. Mrs. Bell argues with temperature sensors. Thomas lies about how much his knee hurts. Fisher reads every resignation letter twice before filing it. Caleb asks questions while carrying breakable objects. Maria sings when she thinks no one is nearby. The west roof fails in patterns no model predicted because 3 generations repaired it differently. Adrian listened. Lena continued, quieter. This is the first place I have managed where success cannot be measured only by whether the system remains operational. What measures it? Whether the people inside it can live well. Adrian looked at her for a long time. Then he said, that sounds suspiciously like something my mother would have said. I found several of her letters. Of course you did. She complained about your father's dinner rules. Adrian's head snapped toward her. What? Lena's mouth curved. Good night, Mr. Whitmore. She walked away before he could demand details. Fisher, standing unseen at the top of the stairs, decided that some privacy could still be preserved in Briarwood after all. The next morning, Adrian called everyone into the old breakfast room. Staff gathered reluctantly. Meetings called by a Whitmore rarely meant anything pleasant. Adrian stood near the windows with a folder in his hand. Lena stood apart from the group. Fisher recognized the cream-colored paper before Adrian spoke. Another appointment letter. Adrian looked at Lena. When you arrived, I hired you under a 90-day trial appointment. Caleb looked horrified. You did what? Fisher elbowed him. Adrian continued. The trial ends tomorrow. Mrs. Bell crossed her arms. If you're planning to fire her, breakfast is cancelled. Marjorie, Fisher murmured. No, I mean it. Adrian looked genuinely startled. Then amused. I am not firing her. Mrs. Bell relaxed half an inch. Adrian held out the folder. Effective immediately, Lena Hale is permanent executive steward and director of estate operations for Briarwood Hall. She has full authority over household staffing, maintenance, vendors, archives, grounds coordination, and capital planning within the limits stated here. Lena did not take the folder yet. Permanent? She asked. As permanent as anything is. Why? Adrian looked around the room. Because the staff no longer feared problems. Because the roof did not leak. Because his mother's letters had been saved. Because an old cook had taken a Sunday off. Because Fisher laughed more. Because Briarwood looked more like the house Adrian remembered loving and less like the house he had spent 20 years trying to control. He did not say all of that. He said, because I was wrong. The room went very still. Fisher thought perhaps the chandelier might fall before Adrian Whitmore admitted that twice in one lifetime. Adrian continued. I said you would not last a month. Caleb made a choking sound. Mrs. Bell looked at Fisher. You knew? Everyone knew. You didn't tell me. You were already betting against her. I was assessing. Adrian held up one hand. This is becoming less dignified by the second. Briarwood survived dignity, Fisher said. It can survive this. Adrian laughed. Lena finally took the folder. She read the first page. Then the second. You removed the termination at will provision. Adrian nodded. You wanted proof I intended you to stay. Lena looked up. Fisher recognized the line immediately. So did Adrian. For a moment no one spoke. Then Lena signed. Mrs. Bell clapped once. Caleb started applauding until Fisher told him to stop, which only made Thomas begin. Within seconds, the entire room was laughing. Adrian stood in the middle of it looking both embarrassed and unexpectedly content. Later that afternoon, summer wind moved through the open windows of Briarwood Hall. The roses along the iron fence had begun to bloom in earnest. Their scent drifted across the south lawn and into the entrance hall whenever the front door opened. Adrian came in from the garden carrying pruning shears. Lena stood at the control cabinet reviewing an irrigation alert. Without looking up, she said, You cut the western climber too low again. Adrian stopped. You were inside. The garden camera works now. That feels like an abuse of technology. It is a rose emergency. He shook his head and walked toward the stairs. Fisher entered from the dining room carrying the silver inventory. Adrian paused beside him. Do you remember what I said the day she arrived? Fisher allowed himself a thoughtful expression. Something about giving her a warm welcome? Adrian looked at him. You are a terrible liar. I have always considered that a professional virtue. Adrian glanced toward Lena. She was already discussing the irrigation problem with Thomas over the household system. 3 months earlier, everyone in Briarwood had been waiting for her to fail. Now the estate moved to her rhythm. Not because she had erased its old rules, but because she had learned which ones mattered. Not because she had made the staff work harder, but because she had stopped wasting what they knew. Not because she had defeated the house, but because she had understood that a house this old was never only stone, wiring, furniture, schedules, and money. It was memory, habit, people, and the strange fragile agreements that allowed all three to live together. Fisher watched Lena close the control panel and head toward the library, where another shelf of uncatalogued books waited. He remembered the first morning, the linen shirt, the gray case, the way every employee had quietly calculated how long she would survive. He remembered the puzzle box opening in 3 seconds. The storm dinner. The kitchen lights. The server room cable at her wrist. The moment he had asked what she was. Months later, he understood that he had asked the wrong question. What mattered was not what Lena had been made from. What mattered was what she had made possible. Briarwood had survived wars, recessions, scandals, marriages, funerals, renovations, and 7 generations of Whitmores. It had endured bad wiring, leaking roofs, impossible rules, and owners who confused control with care. Now, for the first time in years, it was not merely surviving. It was working. It was warm. People wanted to stay. Adrian looked once more toward the hall where Lena had disappeared, then down at the appointment letter copy still tucked under Fisher's ledger. She really did take over the place, he said. Fisher smiled. No, sir. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Fisher listened to the sounds of the old house around them, the kitchen door swinging, footsteps on the upper landing, gardeners talking beyond the windows, and somewhere in the library, Lena calmly correcting a database that had misidentified a first edition. We finally let someone take care of it. Outside, the first full flush of summer roses climbed the old iron fence. And inside Briarwood Hall, no one was waiting for Lena Hale to leave anymore.